The Vanguard was not a ship that inspired fear. It wasn't big, powerful, or fast, like the ships of the advanced alien fleets. In fact, it was a ship that most people laughed at. The Vanguard was old, its technology outdated, and its hull showed signs of wear and tear from years of service. Most thought it was a joke, just a relic of a past age. No one ever expected it to do anything great, not even the humans who commanded it. Captain Emily Harrison had heard the whispers. She knew her ship was considered weak, but she also knew something that others didn't. The crew of the Vanguard was made up of humans who were clever and resourceful, always finding ways to make the most of what they had. They didn't have the most advanced weapons or shields, but they had something that couldn't be measured in terms of technology: human ingenuity. The Vanguard floated quietly in space, its dull gray hull barely visible against the vast, black backdrop. It wasn't the ship that made Captain Harrison proud, but the crew. They worked together as a family, always looking out for one another, always finding ways to get by. Even in the toughest situations, they didn't give up. The ship's crew went about their daily tasks, maintaining the ship, patching up the damage from previous missions, and preparing for whatever might come next. Their mission was to protect the human colonies scattered across the galaxy, but it was a difficult job. The colonies were surrounded by more powerful alien races, some friendly, some not, and the Vanguard was never taken seriously by anyone. "Do you think we'll ever be taken seriously?" Lieutenant Jake Daniels asked one day as he worked on the ship's engine. "I mean, look at us. We can barely outrun a lazy asteroid, let alone an enemy fleet." Captain Harrison smiled but didn't respond immediately. She had heard these kinds of doubts before, from the crew, and from others. But she knew something most didn't. The Vanguard might not have the strongest weapons or the fastest engines, but they had something that couldn't be measured. They had a crew that never backed down. And that, Harrison believed, made all the difference. One day, the quiet of space was shattered by an urgent message from command. A powerful alien fleet, the Sci-Fi Dominion, had begun attacking nearby colonies, and the human government needed every ship they could find to stop them. The Vanguard was called into action, but there was a problem. No one believed the ship could make a difference. "Take the Vanguard," one commander had laughed. "That rust bucket. It's barely fit for a museum." But the order was clear. The Vanguard was to lead a mission to stop the Sci-Fi Dominion. Captain Harrison stood on the bridge, looking out at the stars. "We may not have the strongest ship," she said to her crew, "but we have each other. And that's all we need to make a difference." The crew nodded, ready for whatever came next. They might be seen as weak, but they were far from it. The Vanguard was about to prove that sometimes it's not the ship that matters, but the people aboard it. The stars twinkled peacefully in the deep void of space, but on the human colonies, there was no peace. News had come in from all across the galaxy. Alien invaders were attacking without warning, destroying everything in their path. The Sci-Fi Dominion, an empire known for its ruthless attacks and superior technology, was on the move. Their warships were enormous, equipped with powerful weapons that could wipe out entire fleets in seconds. The human government had no choice but to respond. The Vanguard, the ship no one believed in, was chosen to lead a desperate mission. Captain Emily Harrison stood on the bridge, reading the orders she had just received. She felt a weight on her shoulders. There was no turning back now. "We've been called to the front lines," Harrison said as she looked at her crew. "We may not have the most advanced ship, but we've got something that they don't. We've got heart." The crew had been expecting some kind of mission, but they had no idea it would be this big. Everyone on the Vanguard knew that the enemy was dangerous, but no one thought they would be called to fight the Xylars. The Dominion had wiped out entire fleets of well-equipped ships. What chance did the Vanguard have? Lieutenant Daniels was the first to speak up. "Captain, are you sure about this? The Vanguard isn't exactly a warship. We're outgunned, outmatched, and—" "I know, Jake," Captain Harrison interrupted. "But we have one advantage. We know how to make the most of what we've got. We've been underestimated before, and look where that got us." The crew nodded. They had been laughed at for years. The Vanguard wasn't the strongest or the fastest ship, but it had gotten them through tough times before. It had survived when others thought it wouldn't. This time, though, the stakes were much higher. The ship's navigator, Ensign Mark Reeves, spoke up. "Captain, we've plotted a course toward the Xylar fleet's last known position. We'll be entering their space in a few hours. What's the plan?" Harrison stood tall, her mind focused. "We'll do what we do best, use our size to our advantage. The Vanguard is small and slow, but it's also harder to target. We'll avoid direct confrontation and take out their supply lines. If we can disrupt their supply chains, we'll buy some time for the colonies. We don't need to defeat them in a head-to-head battle. We just need to slow them down." The crew's spirits lifted at her words. They didn't need to fight the Xylar fleet head-on. They just needed to outsmart them. That was something humans were good at. "We'll rely on stealth and surprise," Captain Harrison continued. "We might not be able to take down their battleships, but we can make them pay for underestimating us. Let's show the galaxy what the Vanguard can do." The crew cheered, and the Vanguard set course toward the heart of the enemy's territory. As they moved closer to the Xylar fleet, the atmosphere on the ship shifted. The crew, once uncertain and unsure of themselves, now had a common purpose. They weren't just fighting to survive. They were fighting for the future of humanity. Captain Harrison looked out into the vastness of space, her resolve stronger than ever. The Vanguard may have been weak in the eyes of others, but they were ready to make the galaxy tremble. They were ready to prove that even the smallest ship could change the course of history. The Vanguard glided through the vast emptiness of space, its engines humming softly. The crew was silent, their faces tense, as they neared the heart of enemy territory. Captain Harrison stood at the helm, staring out the view screen. The Xylar fleet was out there somewhere, waiting, and the Vanguard had no way of knowing what to expect. The element of surprise was their only advantage, but how long could that last? "Captain, we're approaching the coordinates," Ensign Reeves reported, his voice calm but tense. "We should be in range of their ships in about 10 minutes. Harrison nodded, her hand resting on the control panel. "Prepare the crew. We need to stay alert and ready for anything." The Xylar fleet had a reputation for being ruthless. They were known for their massive warships, each one powerful enough to destroy a small moon with a single strike. And yet, here they were, facing an enemy far stronger than themselves. Lieutenant Daniels, his eyes scanning the tactical screens, leaned over to Harrison. "There's no sign of their fleet, Captain. They could be hiding in a nearby asteroid field or waiting at a moon. Either way, we won't be able to see them until we're right on top of them." "We've got to be ready for anything," Harrison said, her voice steady. "Let's hope our stealth systems can buy us some time." The Vanguard's stealth technology was one of its few advantages. The ship wasn't fast or powerful, but it could avoid detection. It was old, yes, but still effective. The crew had used it before to sneak past enemy patrols, and they would rely on it again now. Suddenly, the alarm went off, cutting through the silence. "Enemy ships detected," shouted Ensign Reeves, his hands flying over the controls. "There are at least 6 of them. They've found us." Harrison's heart raced. They had been spotted far sooner than expected. "Brace for impact," she ordered, gripping the armrest of her chair. The Vanguard wasn't designed for direct combat, but it was about to face its first real test. Outside, the dark void of space was shattered by the sudden appearance of the Xylar fleet. Massive ships emerged from the shadows, their guns aimed directly at the Vanguard. Their weapons glowed ominously, ready to fire. The crew felt the heat as the first salvo of energy blasts came barreling toward them. The ship shook violently as the Vanguard dodged, narrowly avoiding a direct hit. "Shields at 70%, shouted Lieutenant Daniels, his voice strained. "Take evasive action," Harrison commanded. "Get us out of their line of fire." The Vanguard weaved and dodged through the asteroid field, using the rocky debris as cover. The enemy ships fired again and again, but the Vanguard's smaller size and agility helped it evade most of the shots. "We're not going to outgun them," Harrison muttered. "We need to outsmart them." Ensign Reeves quickly tapped a few buttons on the console. "I'm activating the decoy system, Captain. It should confuse their targeting systems for a few moments." "Good. We need those few moments," Harrison said, her mind racing. The Vanguard's crew had trained for moments like this, where their tactics and quick thinking would make the difference. The decoys launched, creating fake targets that the Xylers began firing at. For a moment, it seemed like the Vanguard had escaped, but it was only a temporary solution. The Xylers were quickly adjusting their targeting, and soon they would have the real ship in their sights again. "We've got one chance left," Captain Harrison said, her eyes narrowing. "We need to hit their supply lines. If we can knock out their ammunition and fuel reserves, they won't be able to keep fighting." Lieutenant Daniels grinned. "Now that's something I can do." With a quick turn, the Vanguard sped toward one of the Xylar ship's rear hangar bays, where they knew the supply reserves were located. The crew held their breath, hoping their risky maneuver would work. The Vanguard rocketed through the asteroid field, narrowly dodging another round of blasts from the enemy ships. The crew had worked quickly to get the decoys in place, but now they had to make the most of the few moments they had before the Xylers found their real target. Captain Harrison gripped the armrests of her chair as she watched the view screen. The enemy ships were closing in, but the Vanguard was smaller and more agile, darting between asteroids and using the space rocks as shields. The plan was simple: get close enough to the enemy's rear hangar, disable their supply lines, and get out before they could retaliate. "Captain, the enemy ships are still in pursuit," Lieutenant Daniels reported, his voice tense. "We don't have much time." "Keep dodging," Harrison replied, her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around them. "We can't let them lock onto us." The crew was moving quickly, working together to put their plan into action. Ensign Reeves had been busy working on the navigation console, making small adjustments to their course in real time. His eyes flicked between the display screens, looking for any sign of an opening. "Captain, we're almost there," Reeves said. "The hangar bay is just ahead." Harrison nodded. "Prepare the sabotage systems. We need to hit their supply reserves with precision." The Vanguard crept closer to the Xylar ship's hangar bay, where their supply lines were stored. It wasn't going to be easy. The hangar was heavily guarded. The Xylar fleet had weapons positioned all around it, ready to destroy any threat that came too close. "We've got one shot at this," Lieutenant Daniels said, a slight edge of excitement in his voice. "If we make it, we might just cripple their fleet for good." Harrison looked at him, nodding in agreement. "Let's make sure we don't miss." The crew worked swiftly as the Vanguard maneuvered through the asteroid field. At just the right moment, the ship shot forward, its engines roaring to life as they approached the hangar bay. "Activating sabotage mode now," Ensign Reeves announced, his fingers flying over the controls. He quickly deployed a set of high-powered, remote-controlled drones designed to infiltrate the enemy's supply reserves. These drones were small and stealthy, perfect for their mission. "Drones deployed," Reeves reported. "They're heading straight for their fuel and ammunition supply." The drones moved quickly, darting toward the heart of the Xylar hangar. The Vanguard continued its evasive maneuvers, dodging enemy fire. The crew held their breath as they watched the small drones approach their target. Then, in the blink of an eye, the drones activated. There was a massive explosion in the Xylar hangar, sending shockwaves through the enemy fleet. Fuel and ammunition reserves erupted in a fiery blast that lit up the surrounding space. "Direct hit. We've done it," shouted Lieutenant Daniels, his voice filled with triumph. But their victory was short-lived. The Vanguard sensors quickly picked up the enemy's retaliatory strike. The remaining Xylar ships were furious, their weapons charging for a massive counterattack. "We've got a few moments," Captain Harrison said quickly, her mind working at full speed. "We've crippled their supply lines, but they won't let us get away easily. Get us out of here, Reeves. Now." Ensign Reeves slammed his hands down on the controls, sending the Vanguard into another high-speed escape. The ship's engines roared as it rocketed away from the explosion, the enemy ship still in hot pursuit. "We're not out of this yet," Harrison said, her eyes focused on the view screen as the enemy ships closed in once more. "But we've got them on the ropes. Let's keep it that way." The crew breathed a collective sigh of relief as they managed to evade another wave of fire. The Vanguard was still standing, and the damage they had done to the Scylar fleet would slow them down, maybe long enough to turn the tide. The Vanguard flew through space, still rattling from the earlier explosions. The crew was exhausted but energized by their small victory. They had done the impossible. They had struck a blow to the mighty Scylar Dominion, and for the first time, it felt like the galaxy's most underestimated ship might actually stand a chance. Captain Harrison stood at the front of the bridge, looking out at the stars. Her eyes were tired, but there was a spark in them. "We've slowed them down, but this is just the beginning," she said, her voice steady. Lieutenant Daniels turned from his station. "That was a pretty big blow to their supply lines, Captain. If we can keep this up, maybe we got a shot." "Maybe," Harrison replied, her eyes narrowing as she scanned the tactical display. "But we need more than just small victories. We need to hit them hard, and we need to hit them fast." Ensign Reeves, who had been working tirelessly on the ship's systems, suddenly spoke up. "Captain, I think I've got something. I've been monitoring the Scylar communications. They're struggling to repair their supply lines. It's causing a major disruption in their operations." "That's good news," Harrison said, her voice filled with determination. "But how can we use it?" Reeves smiled, tapping a few buttons on the console. "We can track their repair ships. They're sending out emergency convoys to fix their damaged supply systems. If we follow one of those convoys, we could take out their repair ships and cripple their efforts even more." Harrison's eyes lit up. "That's a bold move. It could give us the opening we need. Let's do it." The Vanguard changed course, heading toward the location of the Scylar convoy. As the ship moved through space, the crew prepared for what would come next. They had already faced the enemy's full might, and now they would strike at a weak point in their defenses. As the Vanguard approached the convoy, the tension in the air was palpable. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. One wrong move, and they would be surrounded by enemy ships, unable to escape. "We're in position, Captain," Reeves reported, his fingers flying over the controls. "The convoy is about to pass through this sector." Captain Harrison took a deep breath. "Take us in close, but stay out of their detection range. We'll hit them hard and fast, then get out before they know what hit them." The Vanguard crept closer, its engines running quietly as they followed the convoy's path. The repair ships were carrying valuable supplies, and the crew knew that taking them out could deal a devastating blow to the Scylar fleet. "Now," Harrison said, her voice a calm command, "fire the disruptor drones." Reeves launched the drones, which sped toward the repair ships with deadly precision. The drones made contact with the convoy's lead ship, and in an instant, there was a massive explosion. The Vanguard was close enough to see the flames erupt from the ship's hull, a brilliant flash of light in the dark void of space. The Scylar ships immediately went into full alert. "We've been detected," Daniels shouted, his hands flying over the tactical console. "Enemy ships are coming from all directions. Get us out of here, Reeves. Now," Harrison ordered. Ensign Reeves didn't hesitate. With a swift motion, he sent the Vanguard into a high-speed maneuver, dodging the enemy's retaliatory fire. The crew could hear the alarms blaring, but they stayed focused, knowing their survival depended on quick thinking and sharp actions. As the Vanguard darted away, the enemy ships struggled to adjust to the sudden attack. The repair ships were in chaos, unable to respond to the Vanguard's assault. For the first time, The Xylers seemed unsure of themselves, thrown off balance by the humans' boldness. "We did it," Lieutenant Daniels shouted. "We've disrupted their entire repair operation. They'll be dealing with this for a long time." Captain Harrison looked out at the vastness of space, a quiet smile playing on her lips. "It's only a small victory, but it's enough to give us a fighting chance. The Vanguard may not be the biggest ship, but we're starting to show the galaxy that we can make a difference." The crew celebrated their success, but Harrison knew that the war was far from over. There would be more battles, more obstacles, and more dangers ahead. But for the first time, they were no longer just the underdogs. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Vanguard sped through space, its engines purring steadily as the crew took a moment to breathe. The mission had been a success. They had struck at the heart of the Xylar fleet, disrupting their supply lines and throwing their repair efforts into chaos. For the first time, the crew felt like they might have a chance to win. But Captain Harrison knew better than to get comfortable. The Xylar Dominion was powerful, and they wouldn't let the Vanguard's victories go unanswered. She knew they had only just begun to fight. "We've done well," Harrison said, standing at the helm, her voice steady. "But we need to stay on the offensive. We can't let them regroup." Lieutenant Daniels nodded. "I agree. But we've pushed them hard. They'll be looking for us, Captain. We can't keep running forever." Harrison's eyes narrowed. "We won't be running. We'll keep striking when they least expect it." But before she could finish her thought, the ship's communication system beeped. "Captain, we've received a message from the Kreth Alliance," Ensign Reeves announced. The Kreth were an alien species that had once been allies of humanity in the fight against the Xylars. Their fleet was known for being powerful, but they had been quiet for the last few months. Harrison was skeptical about their sudden communication. "Put it through," she said, her voice filled with caution. The screen flickered to life, revealing a familiar face, Captain Jorak, the leader of the Kreth fleet. His alien features were stern, but his eyes were warm. "Captain Harrison," Jorak began, his voice smooth, "it is time for us to join forces. The Kreth are ready to fight the Xylars with you." Harrison studied him carefully. "We could use the help, Jorak, but why now? Why the sudden change of heart?" Jorak's expression remained calm. "The Xylars have been expanding for too long. We can no longer stand by. Our fleets are prepared to strike. We will meet you at the rendezvous point. Prepare your ship." The message ended abruptly, leaving a sense of uncertainty in the air. The crew looked at each other, unsure of what to make of the sudden offer. "I don't trust them," Lieutenant Daniels said, his voice low. "We've fought alongside the Kreth before, but they've always had their own agenda. What if this is a trap?" "We need all the help we can get," Captain Harrison replied, though she too had doubts. "But I'll keep my guard up. We'll meet them, but we won't let our guard down." The Vanguard altered its course and headed toward the rendezvous point. As they approached, the sight of the Kreth fleet loomed ahead. Massive ships that shimmered with alien technology. It was a powerful force, one that could turn the tide of the war. But as they drew closer, something didn't feel right. The Vanguard sensors picked up a sudden change in the Kreth fleet's movements. They were moving faster than they should be, heading toward a location deep in Xylar space. "Wait a minute," Ensign Reeves said, his voice sharp. "They're not heading toward us. They're turning around. They're heading straight for the Xylar fleet." Captain Harrison's heart sank. "It's a betrayal. The Kreth have made a deal with the Xylars." The Kreth fleet, once a symbol of hope, now looked like an enemy force. They had lured the Vanguard into a trap. The Vanguard's crew had been set up. The alliance had been nothing more than a trick. "We've been betrayed," Harrison muttered. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Get us out of here, Reeves." The Vanguard immediately shifted course, but the Kreth ships were already closing in. The crew braced themselves for another fight, this time against an ally-turned-enemy. "We're going to have to fight our way out of this," Harrison said, her voice steely with resolve. We've faced worse before, and we'll face it again. No matter who turns on us, we'll survive." The Vanguard's engines roared to life as the crew prepared for what was sure to be the most difficult battle yet. Xylar Dominion had a powerful ally now, but the humans aboard the Vanguard had something even more powerful: unwavering courage. The Vanguard was surrounded. The betrayal by the Kreth fleet had turned the crew's world upside down. Once, they had thought the Kreth were allies. Now they were just another enemy to fight. Captain Harrison stood at the helm, her face hard and focused. The betrayal had stung, but it had also ignited a fire inside her. "We've been ambushed," Lieutenant Daniels said grimly as he checked the tactical display. The Kreth fleet had closed in, cutting off any chance of escape. "There's no way out unless we fight." Captain Harrison nodded. "Then we fight. We've fought through worse. The Vanguard may be small, but we're not giving up now." The crew stood ready. They had been knocked down before, but they had always gotten back up. Harrison knew they had no choice now but to stand their ground. The Xylar Dominion had turned the Kreth into their allies, and the Vanguard was caught in the middle. But Harrison had always believed in her crew, in their ability to find solutions when there seemed to be none. "Listen up, everyone," Captain Harrison said, her voice steady but full of authority. "This ship may be weak in the eyes of others, but it's the strongest ship we have. We've survived battles that should have destroyed us, and we'll survive this one too. The Tylers think they can crush us. The Kreth think they can betray us, but they don't know what we're made of. We've got the human spirit, and that's something they can't defeat." The crew looked at each other, their faces filled with determination. They might not have the most advanced weapons or the largest fleet, but they had something stronger: their will to survive and their willingness to fight for each other. Ensign Reeves looked up from the console. "Captain, the Vanguard stealth system is fully operational. We might be able to hide in the asteroid field ahead and throw off their tracking systems." "That's our best shot," Harrison said. "Reeves, get us into position. We'll use the asteroid field to mask our presence and make a quick strike. We need to take down their command ships if we're going to make it out of here." The Vanguard moved quickly, its engines powering up as they entered the asteroid field. The crew was focused, each person working together like a well-oiled machine. As they neared the edge of the field, the enemy ships began to lose track of them. "We've lost them," Daniels exclaimed. They'd fallen for it. "We don't have much time," Captain Harrison said. "Reeves, lock onto their command ships. We're going to hit them hard and fast." The Vanguard's weapons powered up, and the crew prepared for their strike. Harrison's heart raced, but she stayed calm. This was what they had trained for. This was their chance to make a real difference. The Vanguard emerged from the asteroid field, striking first with a series of high-powered disruptor blasts. The enemy command ships were hit before they even had a chance to react. The crew watched as the ship's shields flickered and failed under the force of the attack. "We've taken out their lead ship," Lieutenant Daniels shouted, a grin spreading across his face. "We're not done yet, though. Let's keep pushing." Captain Harrison couldn't help but smile. "That's the human spirit for you. Let's show them what we're made of." The Vanguard continued its assault, moving quickly and using the cover of the asteroid field to avoid enemy fire. The crew's training and teamwork paid off as they managed to disable several more enemy ships. The Kreth fleet, stunned by the sudden assault, began to fall back. "We've got them on the run," Daniels yelled. "They're retreating." "We're not finished yet," Harrison said. "Don't let up. We need to make sure they know we won't back down." As the Vanguard fought through the chaos, Harrison felt a renewed sense of hope. The crew had come together in the face of impossible odds, and now they were showing the galaxy that even the smallest ship, with the human spirit behind it, could be a force to be reckoned with. The enemy was retreating, and the crew of the Vanguard had once again proven that they were far stronger than anyone had given them credit for. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, It felt like they had a real chance to win. The Vanguard had dealt a heavy blow to the Xylar fleet, and the Kreth's betrayal had only made the crew fight harder. Now, with the enemy ships retreating, the crew of the Vanguard felt the weight of their victory. But it wasn't over. They had gained ground, but the battle for the galaxy was far from finished. Captain Harrison stood at the helm, watching the retreating Kreth fleet. They had escaped the immediate threat, but the war wasn't over. The Vanguard had survived countless challenges, but now the galaxy was watching. The crew had shown that even a small, outdated ship could make a difference in a galaxy ruled by powerful empires. "Captain, the enemy is retreating," Lieutenant Daniels reported, a hint of relief in his voice. "It looks like they're pulling back, but we don't know for how long." Harrison nodded, her face thoughtful. "This isn't just about survival anymore. It's about sending a message. The Xylar fleet thinks they can crush us. The Kreth thought they could betray us. But they don't realize one thing: we fight for more than just victory. We fight for the future of our people." Ensign Reeves stepped forward, his hands flying over the console. "Captain, I've been monitoring the communications from the Xylars. They're calling for reinforcements. They're planning to return in full force, and they won't stop until they've crushed us." Captain Harrison didn't flinch. "Then we prepare for the next wave. We've shown them we're not afraid, but it's time we show them that we won't back down." The crew moved into action, their focus sharper than ever. They had dealt with setbacks and betrayals, but now they were ready to fight like never before. The Vanguard had become a symbol of resistance, not just for humanity, but for anyone who opposed the Xylar dominion. "We've been underestimated from the start," Harrison said, her voice filled with pride. "And every time they thought they had us, we've come back stronger. The galaxy is watching. It's time we show them who we are." The Vanguard's engines hummed as it moved through space, its crew ready for whatever came next. They were no longer just an underdog ship. They were a force to be reckoned with. The Xylars had underestimated them, and now they would pay the price. "Enemy reinforcements are approaching," Lieutenant Daniels said. "They'll be here in less than an hour. It's now or never." Captain Harrison didn't hesitate. "We'll take the fight to them. We won't wait for them to come to us." With that, the Vanguard changed course, heading straight for the oncoming reinforcements. The crew's faces were filled with determination. This was their moment. The fight for the galaxy had begun, and they weren't going to sit back and let it slip away. As they neared the enemy fleet, the Vanguard locked onto the Xylar ships, their weapons charging for the final assault. The crew knew that this could be their last battle, but they were ready to fight to the end. They had proven that even the weakest ship could turn the tide of war. "We've got one shot at this," Harrison said. "We fight with everything we've got. We fight for our people, for our future." The Vanguard engaged the enemy, unleashing everything they had. The battle was fierce, with explosions lighting up the dark expanse of space. But the Vanguard wasn't backing down. The crew fought with everything they had, proving that the galaxy had underestimated them. They weren't just surviving, they were winning. As the Xylar fleet faltered, retreating once again, the Vanguard stood tall. The galaxy trembled, not from fear of the Xylar or the Kreth, but from the realization that humanity and its allies were far stronger than anyone had believed. The Vanguard had become more than just a ship. It was a symbol of hope, of defiance, and of the power of the human spirit. The galaxy was no longer the same, and the crew of the Vanguard knew they had changed the course of history forever. The battle had raged for hours. The Vanguard had fought with everything it had, dodging enemy fire and striking where the Xylars least expected it. The crew was exhausted, but their resolve remained strong. They had defied the odds before, and they would do it again. Captain Harrison stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the battle ahead. The Xylar fleet was still a formidable force, but the crew of the Vanguard had proven that even the most underestimated ship could make a difference. They had fought back the Xylars once, and now they were about to do it again. "Captain, their shields are weakening," Lieutenant Daniels reported, his voice filled with hope. "We've damaged their lead ship and several others. They're starting to pull back." Harrison nodded. "Good, but we can't let up. We need to finish this." The Vanguard continued its assault, darting through the chaos of the battlefield. The crew worked in perfect sync, each member doing their part to keep the ship in the fight. Ensign Reeves kept the ship's systems running smoothly, while Daniels and the rest of the crew maintained the ship's weapons and shields. They had come this far together, and they were determined to see it through. Captain Harrison's heart raced as she watched the enemy ships begin to falter. For the first time, she could see the possibility of victory. The Xylar fleet, once so confident in their power, was now retreating. The Vanguard had turned the tide, and the crew knew it. "We've got them on the ropes," Daniel said. "They're trying to regroup. If we keep the pressure on, we can force them to retreat for good." "Then let's do it," Harrison said, her voice calm but filled with determination. "We're not stopping now. We've come too far." The Vanguard surged forward, its weapons firing relentlessly at the retreating enemy ships. The crew pushed themselves to the limit, knowing that this could be their only chance to win. But just as victory seemed within reach, a new threat appeared on the horizon. A massive Xylar battleship, larger than any they had faced before, emerged from the shadows. It was fully armed and shielded, and it was heading straight for the Vanguard. "Captain, it's a trap," Ensign Reeves shouted, his voice filled with panic. "They've been waiting for us to overextend ourselves. This ship is too powerful for us to face head-on." Harrison's mind raced. They had come so far, and now it seemed like everything was about to come crashing down. The Vanguard wasn't equipped to take on a battleship of that size. But then something clicked in her mind. They didn't need to defeat the battleship. They just needed to buy enough time for the rest of the fleet to finish off the retreating ships. "We can't fight it head-on," Harrison said, her voice steady despite the danger. "But we can delay it. Reeves, get us close enough to their command center. We'll hit their engines and buy the rest of the fleet time." Reeves didn't hesitate. "Aye, Captain." Preparing to engage, the Vanguard sped toward the massive battleship, its weapons firing in quick succession. The enemy ship returned fire, but the Vanguard dodged and weaved, narrowly avoiding the blasts. The crew worked together, doing everything they could to keep the ship in one piece. As the Vanguard drew closer to the battleship's engines, Harrison knew they were taking a huge risk. If they didn't succeed, they would be destroyed. But they had no choice. The Vanguard had always been the underdog, but it had proven time and time again that it was capable of the impossible. With one final strike, the Vanguard's weapons hit the battleship's engines, sending a shockwave through the ship. The massive vessel staggered, its engines failing. The Vanguard had done it. They had delayed the battleship long enough for the rest of the fleet to finish off the remaining enemy ships. "We did it," Lieutenant Daniels said, his voice filled with disbelief. Harrison looked out at the battlefield, her heart filled with pride. The Vanguard had not only survived, it had won. The galaxy had watched as a small, outdated ship had fought against impossible odds and triumphed. "This is just the beginning," Harrison said, her voice filled with hope. "We've proven that even the weakest ship can make a difference, that Xylars won't forget what we've done today." The crew of the Vanguard stood tall, knowing that they had changed the course of the war. The galaxy had seen the power of the human spirit, and they knew it would never be the same again. The battle was over, and the Vanguard had won. The enemy fleet was in disarray, and the Xylar Dominion had been forced to retreat. The crew of the Vanguard stood in silence, watching as the remnants of the enemy ships drifted away, defeated. The quiet after the storm was almost surreal. They had done it. Against all odds, they had achieved the impossible. Captain Harrison stood on the bridge, her hands resting on the control panel. She could still feel the adrenaline coursing through her veins, but there was a calmness now. The Vanguard had proven itself, and so had its crew. "We did it," Lieutenant Daniels said, breaking the silence. "I never thought we'd pull this off." Harrison turned to face him, a small smile on her lips. "We're not done yet, but we've taken the first step." Ensign Reeves, who had been monitoring the systems, looked up. "Captain, we've received a transmission from the Human Command Center. They've been watching the battle. They want to speak with you." Harrison nodded. "Put it through." A few moments later, the screen flickered to life, revealing General Mathis, the leader of the human fleet. His expression was serious, but there was a hint of admiration in his eyes. "Captain Harrison," General Mathis began, his voice steady, "we've been watching the Vanguard's progress. What you've done here today is nothing short of extraordinary. The galaxy will remember this." Harrison stood tall. "Thank you, sir, but we couldn't have done it without the entire crew. The Vanguard may be small, but its heart is strong." "You've shown the galaxy what humanity is capable of," General Mathis continued. "The Xylers underestimated us, and so did the Kreth. But they've learned a valuable lesson today. We may be small, but we're not weak, and we're not going anywhere." The words resonated deeply with Harrison. The Vanguard had always been seen as an underdog, a ship that didn't stand a chance. But now, it had proven that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in its technology or weapons. It was in its spirit. "We've made a difference today," Harrison said. "But the war isn't over. The Xylers will be back. We need to keep fighting." General Mathis nodded. "You're right. But today, we've taken a huge step forward. The galaxy will remember what you've done. You've given us all hope." Harrison looked out at the stars, a feeling of pride swelling in her chest. The crew of the Vanguard had done more than just survive. They had changed the course of the war. The Xylers had thought they could crush humanity, but the Vanguard had proven them wrong. The fight was far from over, but they had shown the galaxy that humanity would not be defeated. "We've done our part," Harrison said, her voice filled with determination. "Now we prepare for the next battle. We keep moving forward together." The crew stood behind her, united in their resolve. The Vanguard may have been small, but it had become a symbol of something much greater: resilience, courage, and the unyielding will to survive. The Vanguard had given the galaxy something it had lost in the face of the Xylars' power: hope. As the Vanguard set course for the next mission, the crew knew that no matter what came next, they would face it together. They had already defied the odds, and they would continue to do so. The galaxy would tremble, not because of fear, but because humanity had shown that even the smallest ship could change the universe.